Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Online Business Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Keane, here to help you with all things online business or for those of you working in the health and fitness industry. Today's episode, we jump into social media, Instagram in particular, with my guest, David Cleary from Engagency. David is the co-founder of Engagency, a company designed to help you grow and monetize your Instagram audience. This has been a largely requested podcast for more so from the Instagram side on how to grow Instagram, how to build it, what are some of the best practices, what are some of the worst practices. This comes in a lot on my Instagram DMs, or for those of you who are subscribed to my business newsletter and those of you who are long-term listeners to this podcast. So in today's episode, we dive into everything you need to know to grow your Instagram page, from what not to do on Instagram to best practices to growing your Instagram by collaborating or networking with like-minded people, and how to attention hack an audience in terms of jumping in with people who serve a similar avatar or a similar niche to you. Some of the questions that come up and that I've been thinking about myself about using IGTV versus YouTube and where to send people from your Instagram page, using Instagram infographics or using Instagram infographics or videos to make shareable content. So how to grow your Instagram by shareable content, and using the latest trend to grow your following. So how to use Instagram Reels. And lastly, then we touch into Engagency. So who should work with David and his team at Engagency. I'll put a link in the bottom of today's episode or in the show notes. It'll be also be in the description wherever you listen to the podcast if you want to set up a coaching call. I've been working with Engagency now for a few months. They do all my infographics on my Instagram page. It's where I connected with David first. So I'll put a link for anyone that wants to schedule a call with them below. I have a link from a short bonus episode I put up a while back about how to turn one piece of content into many pieces of content. So I'll relink that in the show notes for today. But without further ado, today's episode is a deep dive into Instagram, how to grow your Instagram page with David Cleary from Engagency. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to the Online Business Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Keane. This is the podcast for online entrepreneurs and fitness or health professionals looking to optimize their time, maximize their revenue, and increase their impact by building a business that matters. Now kick back and enjoy this week's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Online Business Podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined with my guest, David Cleary, who is going to help us grow our Instagram page. David is somebody who I've been working with for a while now with this company, Engagency, who do all my infographics. I've mentioned them in a short podcast on how to turn one piece of content into many pieces of content. So I've got to know David quite a bit over the last few months. So today's podcast, we're going to focus on Instagram. So best practices, using infographics, IGTV, Reels, how to create content by collaborating with other people, and how to create content yourself that can work towards your potential customer, your avatar. David, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, cheers, Brian. It's great to be on. It's funny, I actually listened to the podcast for years, so it's always good to be on the other side of it as well.
Yeah, I know. It's something I think that's how we connected first. I think you messaged me on Instagram. You're like, I listened to the Online Business Podcast, or it was the Brian Keane Business Podcast at the time, and we started chatting back and forth, and you kind of talked about Engagency and getting infographics, something that, again, has been a game changer for me because it allows me to put my message across to people and grow Instagram and be very specific to who I'm trying to target. But before we kind of get into Instagram best practices and kind of go down that rabbit hole to help people, talk about a little bit about your backstory with Engagency. What kind of brought you into that realm and then into the world of, say, social media marketing with Instagram in particular?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually started as a coach. So I wanted to move as an online coach, and I just saw the potential there. And I had turned vegan around that time as well. So I saw a kind of gap for a vegan coach. There wasn't too many. This is, almost 4 years ago now. So I just saw an opportunity there, and I figured Instagram was, where it was going to happen over the next couple of years. So I thought if I got on there, started to build my profile there, in terms of getting clients, being seen by people, thought that was a good avenue. So that's where it started. My first year, no real momentum. I always say it took me 1 year to actually get to 1,000 followers. I took some clients on, was doing some online, online coaching, mainly showing people how they could go vegan, those kind of, and the steps I would have took to go vegan. So that's kind of where I started on Instagram. And just by which we'll go into later on, just by networking with people, by doing joint posts, IGTV, doing lives with people. I just kind of, I realized that there was other people trying to grow their pages. They were struggling with creating content and figuring out, best practices to actually grow the page, what would work, what wouldn't work. And I was starting to have some success with growing my page. I was, getting up to 10K, 20K, 30K. And this is where I met Adam. He was also doing some coaching, and Adam is the co-founder of Engagency now as well. So that's where we kind of joined up. People started asking us to create infographics for them. So we had some brands, we had some other coaches, some vegan coaches. So we just sort of started there. Both of us were doing it separately, and we decided, we'd come together because we were doing something very similar. And that's how Engagency was born 18 months ago. We've just kind of come together there, and we've been, we've been working with content creators like yourself, brands, vegan coaches, fat loss coaches, a whole variety of coaches. And yeah, we've just kind of built there mainly on, we would have started with mainly infographics, and now we're kind of moving more into helping people grow their page, maximize the revenue, the profit from their pages, and some of the steps that you can take to do that.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to chat, because my assistant Gaz, who works for me but also does his own personal training, online coaching for GA players, it's something I help him with, but he's with you now as well. And he got some great advice from, I think it was a webinar you did or a live. It was from one of the actual tips on growing Instagram, and that's what made me think, I think David would be brilliant to bring on the podcast and kind of explain a few best practices for people when it comes to Instagram. And we'll talk on collaborating, networking, IGTV, using Instagram Reels, all of the good stuff from Instagram. But when it comes to best practices, or actually let's put the shoe on the other foot to kick us off, when it comes to worst practices for people who are listening to this podcast, it's mostly personal trainers, health and fitness industry experts, people who work in coaching. So people that are in our area, very similar to what you did, David, very similar to what I do, at different levels. What are some of the worst practices you see, in the sense that a lot of coaches do X, Y, or Z, but they would be better doing A, B, or C?
Yeah, so I know this is something you discuss a lot, Brian, but finding out who you serve or who you best serve. And it's the same with Instagram. A lot of people are trying to be something to everybody, and I've never seen that work. You've really got to dive down to who you're targeting, and make sure the content is related to that as well. So I would say that's number one. People trying to have content that's going to serve everybody and it ends up serving nobody. So I would say that's probably number one. And then beyond that is just not treating it seriously, or not treating it like part of your business, and just, sporadic posting, not following up with potential leads, not using a lot of the features of Instagram, and just not giving it any attention. And, that's a great way for it not to grow. I've never seen anybody who doesn't really understand who they're targeting and is, sporadically posting, not really active. I've never seen them grow on Instagram. So yeah, they're probably two of the big things to kick off with.
When it comes to best practices, then would it be the flip of that? So being strategic with your content strategy, replying to messages, or are there other best practices that kind of jump to mind for you?
No, I'd say anybody that does those things, so that they understand who they're targeting with their content. They've got a content creation, process. Doesn't have to be perfect, but they've got some idea what they need to do to get their content that's matching who they're looking to target. And then just being active. Yeah. Just being on your page, showing up in the stories, posting. I always recommend once a day. I'm starting to recommend actually more than that for some people.
On the Instagram wall, on the actual wall, is it?
Yeah, so at the minute, I'm recommending on the feed, and then also posting on the reels, which may or may not go on your feed as well. So that's my go-to at the minute. But yeah, and just it's a social platform as well. And, if you're not engaging with people, you're not talking to people either in DMs or just in comments or in comments on other pages, you're going to miss out. But if you are doing that, you're putting yourself in a great position to succeed.
Talk about that. Something I've mentioned on this podcast in the past, and it's a kind of a feature in the online business course about attention hacking. So going into other people who have a similar audience to who you're trying to serve and trying to engage with either that person or their audience, or potentially collaborating with them in some form, whether it's an IG live or, in my case, I try and do it through a podcast. But talk about that in terms of networking, collaborating with people who, you gave great advice to Gary on this about going out to other GA players who are in that space and doing IG lives with them. What do you advise, or what do you recommend to people, or what's been some of the common trends that you've seen work for people who are successful with kind of networking and collaborating with other people through Instagram?
Yeah, so I suppose if you think it, how can I give value to people in, who I'm looking to attract or who I have on my page at the minute. So if you are like Gary, you're a guy coach, if you can find other people that can bring value, other coaches, maybe players, managers, people that are involved in that area, you can bring them onto your page or you go onto their page. You're bringing a lot of value to people, and they're much more likely to follow you and interact with you in the future if you're bringing them that much value. So I would say that was definitely a game changer for me, is not shying away from that and not, I'm doing my own thing. I don't want to know what anyone else is doing, or I don't want to collaborate with anybody. When you flip that and you're actually open to collaboration, that's really when the magic happens. When, because now people that you're collaborating with, they're sharing you on their profile, they're telling people to go follow you, they're recommending you to their followers, and also on your page, you're just bringing a lot more value because they probably have some expertise that maybe you don't have, or they're bringing a different angle on, coaching or the fitness journey, or whatever that might be. So that was a massive, massive thing for me when I was starting out, and it's still relevant today. It's probably easier now because we have, lives are an easy one to get going. Just do a live with somebody, bring them onto your page, go onto their page, join post, sharing their page on your story. So there's so many ways that you can actually collaborate these days that it's there's never been a better time for it.
Yeah, what you said there, I always think of the Keith Ferrazzi book, You Never Eat Alone, the New York Times bestseller, and he opens that book with Lead with Generosity, that make sure that you're reaching out to somebody and you're providing them value. And I think that's the kind of secret sauce that people can forget sometimes. Like when you're reaching out, like you might not reach out to an influencer with 100,000 followers or 1 million followers because, they're probably busy, they're probably doing things. But somebody in your kind of micro niche who has 5,000 followers, 10,000 followers, that's similar to your audience, connecting with those people can be a very useful way to grow your own knowledge, grow your audience, grow your Instagram page. And I think it's very much a case of the analogy I gave, or what I told Gary. This is from the online business course as well. And David, my philosophy on this is like, just throw shit against the wall and see what sticks. I'm like, if you DM 100 people and 99 say no, but one says yes, you have a net score win of 1. And then you can use that person to leverage getting somebody else on. You can say, I've had, Joey so-and-so on an Instagram live, would you be interested, Jane so-and-so to come on after? And what you end up doing there is using the social proof and using the authoritative bias to leverage and bring more people into your network and connect with them. And I think that's a really useful way. And IGTV, as you said, David, is a very low friction way of doing that, because with the exception of the 20 minutes or 30 minutes it'll take for the live, there's no real post edit, there's no post production, there's no real major setup time. And I think it's a very useful way for people to collaborate. When it comes to creating content then, David, you definitely get this a lot, because I get it sometimes from people I'm working with where they're like, I have no ideas for content, I can't create content. What's your advice for those people?
Yeah, this is definitely something I get quite a lot. So, okay, obviously if we go back to the value thing, and so first of all, your audience is, you want to bring them value. So how can we bring them value? What are their pain points? What are some issues they're having? And then beyond that, what is working as well? So if we can marry those two, bringing that value, but also figuring out what's working on Instagram, what works on your page, if we can, bring those together, we're going to be in a good position. So, it's it can take a while to get to this place where it's, I wouldn't say automated, but it's an easy process for me at the minute. And it did take some time to figure that out. But some of the key things I look for is, what are your content pillars? So just breaking that down into 4 or 5 messages that you want to get across to people. Once you break it down there, you can actually start to just break that further down into ideas. So if I just take an example of my own page, so it's mainly around veganism and vegan fitness. So one of my content pillars would be vegan nutrition topics. They always do very well, and there's an appetite for them. So if I break that down, that's one of my content pillars. From there, I can start to look at, some of the issues. So for example, protein sources. That's obviously a big one in the vegan community. So I can create content around that. B12, iron sources. So I can just go through the list of, nutrients or different issues people are messaging me about. And I can just start to build content around that. And then from there, let's just take vegan protein as an example. I can actually create numerous pieces of content just around that one topic. So you can present it in different ways. You can do a reel. You can do an Instagram live. You can do a tweet post. You can share it on your stories. You can, record videos talking about it. So once you've got that basic idea, there's actually so many ways you can create content from that. You can put in infographics. I've done lots of them as well on, vegan protein per 100 calories, the best vegan protein sources. So when you actually start to break it down and put a bit of a system behind it, it can get a lot easier. Things can get a lot quicker, because I suppose when you're starting off, one post might take you 2-3 hours. But when you start to get a bit of a system, suddenly that one idea can become 5-6 posts within an hour. You can sit down, write out the same topics. You're putting one into a tweet, one to an infographic. You're recording a quick reel talking about that same thing. And if you just repeat that, it might take you 2 to 3 hours, but actually at the end of that, you've got a month of content ready to go. So just to break it down, that's kind of how I do it at the minute.
How do you find out what works? What's your kind of metric for testing? And the reason I ask is one of the things that I have to get very clear on with people I'm working with in business is what's the purpose of your post, which means that if they're using an infographic, if they're using a reel, if they're using a video, and they're like, well, I didn't get any likes or comments. I'm like, but was that the purpose of the content? If you're putting up a before and after picture, if you're a weight loss or fat loss coach, I'm like, you're not looking for likes and comments. You're looking for DMs and inquiries on your program, I'm assuming. So being clear on what the purpose of the content is. What do you use to kind of track in terms of metrics? Is it all about the likes and comments for you? Is it about the DMs you get? Is it about building ideas for future content? What's it kind of look like for you in terms of how you decide or how you determine if this piece of specific content is working or not?
Yeah, so it depends on what stage I'm at. So if you're just purely trying to build a page, which I was doing, I'm just looking at content that will get the most shares, likes, and engagement. So that's my focus there. But if I, have a program, for example, which I do have one coming, then it's going to be more covering those topics, and the engagement, the likes, the comments are not going to be the same on that. But if that gets more people in my DMs and, more clients from it, well, that's what I want from that. So I think having a mix is generally what I recommend, and most people I work with, that is what I recommend, is having those pieces of content that will grow the page and get new people onto your page and, boost your engagement. But then also having those pieces that are, to get clients. Because if you're a coach, and your main revenue source is online coaching, then we want to get clients. So it's just kind of separating those pieces out over the month, and, trying to bring as much value as you can, but then also letting people know that, your service is there, you're a coach, you've got these results with people, and that you're open, DM me to learn more, content like that. So, there's no set quota on how many, but I tend to focus more on, at certain stages, on that viral kind of content that's going to get pushed out more. And then I might flip it through the period. So where I'm actually focusing more on the content that would get people to DM me to open a conversation with them.
Why do you think infographics are so effective on Instagram?
It's easy, it's digestible. People, they can be scrolling, catch your attention straight away. The information is presented there. They don't have to click the caption and read more, or they don't have to go elsewhere. The vast majority of information is in that square, that rectangle. So that's why they're so effective. Is it can be hard to catch people's attention at the minute, and even if you do catch their attention with an image, it's very unlikely that they'll actually read the caption that goes with it. You'll get a certain percentage, of course, but if we can hook them in with an infographic and get across the main point straight away, and get their interest there, they're much more likely to actually check out your page or read the caption, and hopefully either leave a comment, like whatever you're trying to get them to do after that. So that's generally why they work so well. And it can be tough to get people's attention. So this is one where we found over the years that can actually, that can make them stop. The information's all there, and it just hooks them in straight away.
And it's very shareable. I think that was the reason that I kind of got the growth. What I've started doing is combining the infographics and videos, so overlapping that content, but it's very shareable, particularly infographics, because people will share it on their stories, because it captures your image or captures the message of whatever it is you're trying to put across in a very easy to digest way, as you said. And I think that's why it's such a good feature. And you end up getting a lot of, I won't say organic traffic. It is organic in the sense that you've created a piece of infographic and it's coming in. It's not a paid ad through Instagram, but it's bringing people who are sharing that content, who are clicking into your page and then following, because your wall is serving them with lots of different pieces of content that you've built up there over time. And I think that's a very effective, or one of the reasons it's so effective, definitely speaking from firsthand experience. When it comes to Instagram, I think Reels is definitely the one I'm keeping an eye on at the minute, because they're obviously taking the best features from TikTok. I know that's what they did with Snapchat when it came with Instagram stories. But for you, David, or with Engagency in particular, with the amount of people you're working with, what's been or what is the most exciting feature on Instagram for you right now?
Yeah, it would definitely be Reels, and it's definitely somewhere that we are looking at, and doubling down our efforts there, because there's a couple of reasons. Obviously TikTok had that explosion in the last 18 months, and people are more familiar with those 15, 20, 25-second videos. And also on Instagram with Reels, the organic reach is so much better on them at the minute. So while some, obviously, the other posts can still catch people's attention, Reels at the minute are just getting pushed out a lot more. There's less creators on there, so it's less noisy. So the chance of you getting discovered there is a lot higher at the minute. And it's a different way of communicating as well. So obviously Instagram was very visual for years. Now we've got IGTV was fine. It probably never popped off the way they expected. But now we've got the short form video that's really captivating people, and they're used to it. Most people will be familiar with TikTok at this stage. So, people want to see this, and it's kind of come at a perfect time as well to actually reignite Instagram, because the organic reach was dying off. But now as Reels have come in, it's actually flipped, and it's maybe where it was 2-3 years ago.
And one of the things that we'll probably experiment on our side, and I've been doing this with TikTok and the infographics on Instagram, is, for example, if I have 6 reasons you might not be in a calorie deficit, which is an infographic you've created for me at Engagency based on podcasts that I've done, I end up taking that content for TikTok and then just do those 6 points with the song and pointing to the major 6 reasons. And I think that will double over for Reels for people who have that infographic. So you end up creating 2 pieces of content from one, or you can do a video for it, a blog post. You end up completing or creating multiple pieces of content from just this one infographic that you have. I think that's really useful. You mentioned IGTV there. Kind of curious, David, as your kind of best practice with Engagency and the people you're working with, do you recommend, and this is something I'm still struggling with, so I wouldn't mind your opinion on this, would you recommend when people are creating videos, would you say that they should upload it to IGTV, or should they upload it to something like YouTube and then send people from Instagram to YouTube? Or have you any kind of opinion on that either way?
I think it's better being on YouTube, but if you do have an audience, I would still put it up onto Instagram as well. But I find if you don't,
would you put it on both?
Yeah, do it on both.
Yeah.
But if you don't have an audience, or maybe your audience is more on YouTube and you're still building Instagram, I would say just push people there, because an IGTV will not really, they're not great for building the page compared to something like Reels, where you can actually get a lot of growth from them. IGTV, you're probably not going to see much growth from them. But if it's a good video and it's a message you want to get across, okay, well then it's probably worth sharing it. But I just find the organic reach is so low on them, and the views can be quite low as well, that it might not be worth it.
And I think when it comes to Instagram, I've definitely experienced this, that when they bring a new feature, Instagram tend to push it very heavily out to organic people who aren't following you. So I remember when stories came first, it was everybody saw your stories. When IGTV came first, they were pushing it out to everybody. And now they're doing it with Reels. And it does the kind of 180 flip, where IGTV, when it came out first, worked really well for getting out your videos to people who aren't following you. And now it's kind of it's nearly like it's just a dead dog in the corner. It's there, but it doesn't really do anything. Like it's Instagram have kind of, looks like from my vantage point, that they've given up on that as a competition for YouTube, which I think was the original idea, and now it's right, Reels is where we're focusing. So I think it's important for people to understand that Instagram changes its algorithm regularly, and the new things they bring out, they tend to put a heavy focus on. So it's about jumping on that and maximizing it and kind of putting as much as you can into the thing that's hot right now, so that you're able to get full benefit of it from it until they change up the algorithm. Do you find, David, that it's important, or actually, side question with that, when it comes to improving your knowledge on, say, the Instagram algorithm, on the new things that come up, do you listen to podcasts or read blogs, or is it just a trial and error? You spend kind of hours on Instagram figuring things out, or is it a combination? Where do you get your knowledge from in terms of staying on top of the social media trends, Instagram in particular?
Sure. So it's a bit of a mix for me. So I will listen to what other people in this space are talking about, but then I also like to experiment myself, and that's something I definitely recommend with anybody. You can spend all day watching YouTube, listening to podcasts, and I do spend some time on that, but you never really know until you get in there and start creating them yourself, how to do on your page, which ones are going to do best. So there's a lot to be said for actually just starting somewhere and starting to create. Even if your first reel is not perfect, but maybe after 50 you've actually nailed it, and you're going, you're getting 50k, 60k views on it, maybe more. So there's a lot to be said for just getting stuck in with those new features and just finding out what works. So I tend to do a lot of that, and I use my page as, I suppose, a bit of a testing ground before we roll it out for our clients at Engagency. So I kind of, with Reels, I'm just testing out a lot of different styles, ones that may work, and then we'll start to roll them out over the next couple of months. So yeah, I would say if you're a coach now and you're not quite sure, just try one, see how it goes, take some learnings from that, maybe watch one or two YouTube videos, try again, and don't get too hung up as well. I suppose you already have content on your page if you've been on Instagram for a while. So just go back, see what's been working before, maybe what pieces did the best, and just think, how can I translate that into a reel? So you don't have to, come up with new content ideas for them. You can just take what's been working and present that in a reel format.
Any podcast in particular? I know myself, I tend to listen to Social Media Examiner, a little bit of Gary Vee from time to time, just because he puts up a lot of different content across a lot of different things, but his social media stuff in particular I consume. Any other podcasts that you are subscribed to that you like that tends to update your social media knowledge?
Yeah, I would say Gary Vee is definitely someone I would listen to for that. He's always, well aware of the trends. There's no one else that comes to mind. There's a couple of, quite strong Instagram pages that I would recommend. So it's Stephen Meller is quite a good one for, staying on the trends and kind of just getting some more information around that. And then I've actually set up my own page, focus more on Instagram points as well. So if anybody is looking for more about that, That's at David Cleary, IG Coach, where I'm going to try and stay on top of those trends and present them in, a digestible format for people as well, that they can take what they need to know, if that's about Reels or any other new features that are coming.
Love that. I'll link that in the show notes for today's episode as well. Dave, I just have a couple of more questions that I want to kind of pick your brain on. When it comes to Instagram, as we've talked on a lot of things on best practices, worst practices, using infographics, IGTV, Reels, growing, by collaborating and networking with people. But if you had to compress it down to one thing that people need to do with their Instagram page, what would the one thing be? And I know it's a very difficult thing. It's like when somebody asks me, what's the one thing someone needs to do for fat loss? I'm like, calorie deficit, but XYZ, 1, 2, 3, ABC. But if you had to compress it to one thing to grow your Instagram page for people that are listening who are feeling motivated now and they want to get on it, and this is the seed that's planted the future tree of Instagram growth, what's the one thing that they need to do now, or the one thing they need to focus on next in order to start growing their Instagram page?
Yeah, the number one is just being on there and just start posting. There's no way around that. You've got to be on there, and you've got to start building up that insight to see what's working. Without that, you can't plan any future content because you have no idea what's going to work on your page. So if you're someone on the fence today, and maybe you've got some pictures from the gym, you've got some, maybe you're cooking, you've got some meal prep, just put them up, write a caption that goes with it, see what the response is. Come again tomorrow, try a different image. Maybe you want to try some infographics on Canva, you want to try record a reel, but just get started. It's like anything. Just by getting in there, you start to learn what's working, what isn't, and there's no right or wrong answer with it. You got to find your content mix over time. So, but you'll never find out if you're not on there and you're not posting, talking to people, communicating with people on there. So, yeah, that's my number one, is just stop consuming all the YouTube, all the podcasts, all the how-to, and just actually go on there and start trying it yourself.
I love that. I have a bit of a tough love approach when it comes to people I work with who are afraid to post on their Instagram. And the reason for the tough love approach, I've talked on this on previous podcasts, is there's certain fears that tend to be kind of deeply embedded in people that I wouldn't be like, just fucking do it. Someone that has behavioral issues around food, or, fear around, attacking something that they really want to go after. There's a lot of deep rooted things there. But when it comes to a fear of posting on Instagram, I'm like, just fucking do it. I'm like, 5 posts in, 5 days later, you won't be afraid to post anymore. Like, I've seen it time and time and time and time again from people who will message after a week and they're like, actually, it's not a big deal anymore. I'm like, I know. And I think anyone that's in that bracket on that side of the spectrum who's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it, but then the fear kicks in, just fucking post. Just do it. Just put it up there. And as David said, course correct as you go along. And once you're getting that feedback, you can take it and move your course in a specific direction. Like a lot of my programs, a lot of my courses, a lot of the things that I've created are all off the back of posting content and then just listening to feedback and then asking people what they want. Speaking of which, talk about Engagency, David. It's something, and again, I'm not going to speak too much on this because I'm working with you on this. You've been doing my infographics for months now. It's been brilliant for me. It's been so useful, so helpful. But for those that are looking to potentially work with you with Engagency, explain a little bit how that process works.
Yeah, of course. So mainly we work with coaches, and what we're looking to do is improve their content, and depending on where they're at, is get them growing. So maybe they've been at it for a year and they're only at 500-600 followers and I want to get to 1,000-2,000. We had them, first of all, let's improve your content, and then how can we get you growing? So similar to the conversation I had with Gary in terms of doing more IG lives and communicating with people in his niche. There's all these kind of growth hacks that we can start to bring in once we've got the content improved. So that's essentially what we do. We work with a wide variety of coaches from, vegan, fat loss, muscle building. We've got some pro bodybuilders. So a wide variety of coaches there. And then in terms of how we work, so, someone, they come to us when they want to sign up, and generally what we start with is infographics, because we know people can probably get the pictures and the images themselves, but maybe they're not giving enough value in their content. So that's where we can come in with infographics, which are, completely focused on giving value straight away to the person in that easy to digest manner that we discussed earlier. So we'll get some of them. We focus there, start improving the other piece of content as well, give them some tips around that. If that's how we can improve the captions, how we can improve, if they're doing tweets, if they're doing reels, how we can improve all that as well. So, and then from there, it just keeps going. If we want to focus on other areas like reels, if they're, they're already growing, how can we get them growing quicker? If that's through shout outs, if that's, doing different collabs with people, it varies in terms of where the coach is at. But that's essentially how it works with us is, number one, let's improve your content. And then number two, how can we get you growing and, get more of your target audience onto your page? And finally, let's just say, you've got your content dialed in, you've got your audience, you've built up a decent sized audience. How can we start converting that then into actual clients? So, do you have a lead gen system in place? How are you nurturing people? So I would say they're kind of three things that we focus on with people.
And something I'm going to add there, I don't know, Dave, if you remember our original conversation, you may or may not, when you were kind of talking to me about Engagency, about the infographics. I was like, how do you create the content? And you told me, you're like, look, you've got content ideas. So you take my podcast or videos or content that I've created and you end up creating, or your team create infographics based on that. And I don't know if you remember this, but I remember telling you day one that I was like, I'm going to give it 3 months and try it out. I'm like, but your job from my perspective is to make my life easier. I was like, if your strategy and way you approach things makes my life easier, I'm like, I'm all in on this. And that's what it's been like for the last few months. It's very much a case of, and I mean this, and I sound such a fucking twat when I say this, but like, I'm quite busy in the sense that there's lots of things between book deadlines and podcasts and other things that if I had a million conversations to get an idea across, to get one infographic, it wouldn't be worth that to me. And that's where I think you really stand apart. It's a case of, I'll go into, which is Asana now, what you're running through, but prior it was a different platform, and you'll have all the ideas, a spreadsheet on, here are the ideas for the upcoming month. I'll go, yeah. They're all ideas that I've covered before. And I go back into it a month later or a week later or 2 weeks later or whatever it takes to create the infographics, and they're all there. And it's just a case then of editing them so that I'm using my language or tweaking them a small bit if I dislike an image and prefer to use something else. And before I know it, I've got my infographics. And I think that for people is huge, because if you're in that bracket of, you don't want one more thing to add to your plate where you're going to have to put in loads of time, loads of energy, loads of effort. This is how you cut down on that. You work with David, or you work with Engagency, or you work with somebody who's going to make your life easier. And I think that's where anyone that's listening who's considering working with you will definitely come in, on top of the Garys of the world, people early on where you're giving them actual growth hacks and strategies to use. But for people on the other end of the spectrum where I'm at, where you have money, but you might not necessarily have time, you want to try and get some of your time back and provide content. Like a good infographic, similar to a good before and after, similar to a good video, could get you 5, 10, 15, 100 leads in some case. And if you're converting those leads and you've got a good funnel, you're going to make a lot of your money back, and you should be up on any service like this. So I just wanted to add that as someone who's lived it, I think it's important for people to know that it makes your life easier, especially once by I think month 2, David, definitely by month 3, you had my content dialed in. You're like, okay, this is the language Brian uses. This is his avatar. This is who he's working with primarily. And it took very little then for me to be like, yeah, X, Y, Z, this is what I want. So I just wanted to add that for people, because I think it's beneficial for them to know.
Yeah, of course. And like for a lot of people, it is that time saving, and also, having the ideas there. So yeah, you don't have to think of ideas for your infographics now, because you're getting these ideas presented to you. And like with yourself, Brian, you have all that content from the last couple of years, either on Instagram, your podcast, all the blogs. So it's easy for us to go in and start generating ideas from there. And even if you're, don't have as much content as Brian might have, you still probably have a blog, or you've done post, or you've got some ideas there that we can actually start to work with. So we take away that idea generation side as well, where you can give your input, but we're also getting these ideas for you and taking that time as well.
Yeah, and I'm a testament to that. Again, one of my favorite things about Engagency and working with you. David, I've loved this conversation. I think for anyone looking to grow their Instagram page, there's so much there. The take-home message for me is just to move forward and just start posting and start course correcting as you go along. It's your one thing, and some actual tips there on, using IGTV, collaborating with people, the reels. I think there's so much value for people. For everyone listening, David, where's the best place for them to reach out? I'll put a link to Engagency. I've got a link already to schedule a call from a previous episode that I did where I talked about using Engagency for creating content. So I'll link that for anyone that wants to jump on a call with you and the team. But for anyone that wants to follow you directly, that page you have set up about distilling and breaking down complicated ideas in terms of how to create content. Any links you want to give now, David, tell me, and I will put them in the show notes for today's podcast.
Yeah, 100%. So my main page is David Cleary Vegan PT on Instagram. So that's if anybody is vegan or interested in that kind of side of things, you can follow me there. And then David Cleary IG Coach is my more Instagram focused with kind of growth hacks, content creation hacks. So yeah, they're my two main pages.
And for everybody listening, I will link those in the show notes for today's episode. As I said, I'll also link the schedule call for anyone that wants to talk about signing up with Engagency. David, thank you for all the value. Thank you from my side for all the awesomeness with Engagency and helping to grow my Instagram page. And thank you for your time, mate. Love this.
Cheers, Brian. Thanks a lot.
So there you have it, how to grow your Instagram page with David Cleary from Engagency. So as I mentioned, anyone that wants to jump on a call with Engagency, I'll put that link in the description below or on the show notes on briankeenfitness.com. For anyone that wants to check out my online business course that I mentioned a couple of times in today's episode, I'll also link that in the description for anyone that's looking to move their personal training business online. That's everything from today's episode. Hopefully you enjoyed. As always, if you've been listening for a while, hit that rating. That will help the podcast get up there on iTunes and different platforms so that we can bring on more people who can serve you with your online business, or potentially moving online in the future, or even just building up your service-based business using things like Instagram and other social media platforms. If this is your first time listening, be sure to hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button for episodes coming every single month. That's all from this month's podcast. Catch you all next month.